and welcome to the Paletteful Packs YouTube channel. My name is Alice and today I have the December 2024 Paletteful Premier Pack here in front of me. So let's go ahead, open it up and see what's inside. Ooh, I see brushes and paints. This looks like a fun pack. Okay, so the first thing I see on here is this big old paintbrush from Simply Simmons. It's a size 10. This is an acrylic paint pack. So this is a really nice long handle brush, nice big size, perfect for painting backgrounds. And it's gonna have really stiff bristles, so that's gonna like hold their shape and it's gonna give you these really nice kind of like textural strokes. So that'll be really, really fun to play with. Next thing I see in here is this Marabou art spray I have Sky Blue. These art sprays are so fun. I already have a few of them, but I don't have this color, so I'm really excited to receive it. There are basically these water-based acrylic sprays, but they're not like, they're like this kind, little pump, and I'm not gonna push it because then that would be messy, but little paint just sprays out and it's really fun. They're like little miniature spray paints. So they're really fun to use and I love them. They're really great to use with like different types of abstract art and just, yeah, really, really fun product. So I'm excited to have some more of those. I'm seeing a YONO, which stands for You Only Need One marker. This looks like it's in the color Cherry Red, so nice bright red color there. These are acrylic markers, so water-based opaque ink, and they're gonna work on multiple surfaces, canvas, glass, wood, all of that good stuff. And also you're gonna be able to blend the ink while it's still wet. So those are really, really fun to use. Some System 3 Daler Rowney in here as well. We're going to get two of the Daler Rowney System 3 fluid acrylics, ultramarine and lemon yellow, which together makes such a pretty green. So I'm already kind of visualizing what I'm gonna do with those. But these are super high quality, light fast pigments. And you can use these for like pouring and dripping and liquid art techniques. And they have a really fine like nib too, so you can almost draw with them. It's really fun. Oh, altitude, it's exploding on me. I see another brush in here. This is a Princeton Select Angular Shader in 1/2 inch. This will be perfect for filling in larger areas, but also getting nice details by using this side edge and this little point right here. I love angular shaders. They're so nice and easy to use. Teeny tiny canvas. We love a good teeny tiny canvas. This is by Art Alternatives. It is a 2x3 mini canvas. We also have a YONO marker in dark blue, so it looks like we're gonna get at least two of those. Then we're going to get a Posca marker in white, super, super helpful. We love Posca markers. This is a bullet shape 0.7 millimeter nib. Posca is a very, very popular brand of acrylic paint markers, really nice and opaque, high pigmented markers. We have another brush in here. This is a size 8. It is a flat by Robert Simmons, going to look like this. This is gonna be great for getting in even finer details because we can get that those tiny little areas with kind of the edges and the corners of this brush. Now we have this big set right here. Oh, and cute little sticker. So we have the Daler Rowney System 3 Acrylic Introduction Set. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. These are the paints that I use. I use the Daler Rowney System 3 acrylics on a nearly daily basis. They're my go-to paints along with the Golden Open slow drying paints. I tend to use these for base and then the Golden Opens to kind of like refine and do like a lot of detail work. So I am so excited to work with these. These are really high quality, high pigmented paints. They dry to a really nice matte finish. They are beautiful to work with and I am really, really excited to show you how I work with them. Last thing in here, we have some Daler Rowney Simply Canvas panels. We have a 3-pack. This is gonna be 8x10. Canvas panels, as you know, are nice thin panels, ideal for making little like paintings on. I like to use them for studies and sketches and things like that. So perfect for experimenting with all of our different acrylic media. So this was a jam-packed set. As you can see, we got so much stuff in here. We got the System 3 acrylic introduction set. We got the Marabou art spray, 3 paintbrushes, 2 YONO markers in blue and red, the Posca marker in white, the mini canvas, the 3 canvas panels, the 2 Daler Rowney System 3 fluid acrylics, And then the cute little sticker. So that is everything. I'm so excited to make some art with these things. So let's go ahead and get started playing around. So I'm going to start out by playing around on the tiny little canvas, and I'm spraying the back of it with water just to make it really tight. And then I go in with the spray, and then I start putting the acrylic markers on it. And I like to just kind of like explode the markers in the wet paint, and you can see they bleed out and do all kinds of cool things. And then I was like, let's draw a squiggly line with the yellow, and then let's put a blue squiggly line inside the yellow squiggly line, and then let's put white on it. And I was like, this is gonna look like a giant mess. And then I decided to blow it with a hairdryer to see what would happen. And then I patted it out with my finger. This is just so ridiculous. Like, I really had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, let's make a pretty texture and then see where things go from here. But I let that dry, and something fell on it halfway through, but it's fine. And I kind of like it. It's kind of like giving lava or something, or magma at that point. But then I started going over it with some white and some blue. And at this point, I'm kind of almost feeling like you're underwater in like an underwater cave looking up, and you can see the water like peeking through. And so I'm like getting these kind of like hazy areas and like sun streaks almost, but I'm keeping it abstract. And then I kind of start getting some like foliage in. Like if you are in this like underwater cave, maybe there's some foliage around you. Again, very abstract and nothing super detailed because it is so tiny. I'm just kind of trying to play around with the supplies really. But I wanted to add in some darker green details, so I'm using the acrylic paint to do that, mixing up that green with some of the burnt umber to make a nice dark green, and using that to add in those little like foliage details, and then spraying it with some blue just to add in a little bit more underwater effectiness. And for some more abstract fun, I added in some of these little stencils, and then I painted the edges black so that it looked neat. And I find that edges really help with abstract art. It almost like defines where it ends, so it's important to define them. Oh, I dropped it. But this is kind of how my first little experiment came out. I really had no idea what I was doing. There was no plan with this. It was just vibes. So then I splattered some black paint on it and then went in with the white Posca marker to add some final little defining details, which are kind of almost like kelp-like shapes, but with dotted and dashed lines, just kind of in the bottom right corner, and then a little bit more of those kind of sun streaks and some little dots, like little pieces of things floating in the water. And this is how it turned out. I think it's weird and interesting, and it was a good way to warm up and get back into art. It's been a while since I've done anything abstract or anything for myself. So let's dive into the second piece, which is definitely a little bit bigger and a little bit more detailed. So I started out with an abstract because that's how I like to work. So I sprayed the entire thing with water, sprayed it with the blue marabou spray, and then started tracing those lines with the blue marker, added in some white Posca, and then swirled the whole thing around. Started dabbing some bits off, and then I went in with a sponge and the fluid acrylic, and I just started smashing that around. I really played with a lot of textures in this, and to play with textures, I find that you can use a lot of things from around your house, so that's kind of what I use. This is just like a beauty sponge, I think, that I cut up, and then I have some texture paper that I found that I lay down, and then I pull up that acrylic paint with some paper towel, and then I also used the sponge to kind of put down some acrylic paint, and then I'm using that big bristle brush because we can get some beautiful textures with that, and putting white directly on it and starting to blur and blend that into the background. Again, I don't really know what this is going to turn out as, and a lot of at this point, and a lot of this stuff is really just kind of going to get covered up, but a lot of it's important for kind of guiding me to where I'm going to end up, if that makes sense. For me, a lot of the process is in the painting. So I mixed up that ultramarine blue with some burnt umber, again, of the paint, and laid some down, and then blended it out with this automobile part for a Dremel that I had lying around. Went in with a sponge. Again, for mixed media abstract things like this, think outside of the box, literally. Look around your house for things that you might have lying around, sponges, papers, things like that that you can use to create interesting textures. I ended up really liking how this blurred it out, so I ended up blurring it out a bunch with that. I thought it looked really cool, and so there went away a lot of the texture that I had built, but that is the process, is sometimes you paint over things. Going in with the smallest brush and adding in some darker kind of gray blue lines in this bottom corner, spraying everything with water, and then spraying in some of that blue spray to bring up a little bit more of that blue. I also go in with a texture paper again and start adding in some white for some really nice little textures here. I love adding in textures this way. These paints, as you can see, are so opaque. Look how covered, like how that white covered, and that's like on wet paint. They're really opaque, and they're really fun to layer. You can mix them with water to make them more translucent, and you can get all these different wet on wet effects. And I feel like this just shows the versatility of these paints, is how many different ways I have used them and how many different like methods of using them I have done just in this short time. You can really see how versatile the paints are. I mixed up kind of a blue-green, and I'm starting to create some almost wave-like strokes. This is definitely feeling like an underwater piece for me at this point, so I'm kind of leaning into that, spraying it with more blue and letting it dry. Once it was dry, I traced the outline of some of these brush strokes with the fluid paints directly on there. Thought that would look really cool, but I didn't like really love how it looked once I did it. So I had to do a little problem solving. Like, I felt like there was an idea there that I liked, but the execution wasn't quite how I wanted it to be. So I sprayed the whole thing with water and let it sit for a little bit. And then I kind of used my finger to pat out some areas. So I was still keeping this like raised texture where the fluid paints were, but also letting them blend and blur out. And I ended up liking that a lot better. And once it dried, it gave this really cool kind of like bubbly texture to it. Another thing that you can use to create textures, this is a brush cleaning mat that I got from the dollar store. So look around for things that you could use to make stamps. You can also create your own stamps, lots of fun things that you can do to create abstract textures. And then using this big bristle brush to very lightly brush over the tops of that texture that we created with the fluid acrylics and tint it a lighter color. And you can see it looks really cool. It makes the texture pop. And then I pressed that blue marker in and sprayed the whole thing with water and kind of let it drip around and tint certain areas blue, and lifted that off in certain areas where I wanted other things to shine through. I'm just kind of playing around with building up the blues at this point. I'm really committed now to this blue color palette with a little bit of light yellow. So I'm playing around with emphasizing some of the areas now that I have created, this kind of like textural area, and adding in more interest. Kind of work from large to small. I've mentioned this before. You kind of work in a large general sense and then slowly narrow things down as you go. Adding in some more drips because you can never have too many drips. I love working wet on wet. I just think you get such cool effects. And speaking of working wet on wet, one of my favorite techniques is this, where I just press the Posca marker into the paint and let it dry, which I think looks really cool. So once I let that dry, I was relatively happy with the overall background as kind of a base, and I felt like it was time to add my character. And for this, I decided to do a sea butterfly because they are super pretty and interesting, and I learned about them from Animal Crossing. But I mostly had the colors to use it. To do it, I knew that I would be able to really highlight the bright yellows and oranges and reds that we got. And we also had so many blues, and it's like orange and blue, so I felt like it was the perfect kind of fit for the color schemes that we got here. And I love the orange on the blue. I think it just like pops so nicely. So I'm using the regular acrylic paints, and I'm using the smallest flat brush to kind of build out these areas. And as you can see, I drew the overall outline with the Posca first, and I put white down with the Posca in the areas that were going to be yellow because I knew that would make them more saturated when I put the yellow on top, because it's going on top of white instead of blue, which is going to make it look more green. So I kind of did that so that they would show up and be a little bit more glowy. And then I'm putting in kind of the base layer of the blue, a little bit of base shading. I'm keeping it really loose at this point. I'm not super worried about getting into all of the details and the veins and things like that. I'm just kind of trying to establish where the folds are, where the general like parts of the body are, because you can kind of see parts of its internal organs as well, kind of glowing. So trying to figure that out. And then I also really needed like a bright teal. And so I decided to kind of do an optical illusion sort of thing where I went in with yellow and then I went straight in with some of that blue marker and then white and blended it all on the canvas. And blending it on the canvas, I just felt like I was losing less and it felt like the color stayed more vibrant and more saturated. So that's why I did it that way. And now using some dark red to kind of, well, it's not dark red, but bright red to really establish kind of some of the shadows in the orange areas. And at this point, I was like really questioning my decision to paint a sea butterfly. I was like, wow, this is a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And I don't know if it's going to turn out the way that I want it to. But I was just like, just keep going, just keep painting, just keep painting. And so I just kind of slowed down and tried to figure out where all of the different areas were, just by blocking them in really slowly with little bits of color, blocking in this little orb and then that little orb or whatever they were. And I feel like it slowly pulled itself out of the ugly teenage phase. At this point, I was like, I really need more definition. So I let it dry and I went in with the white Posca marker. And my plan is to draw all of the areas that are really bright and glowy in white and then glaze over them. Glazing is an acrylic technique where you use a watered down version. You can use either glazing medium or in this case water to water it down. And you kind of go over the top of a pre-existing color with it. So I'm using this white marker because it's so fine in detail to get in all of these little details, all of the little specks and magic-y dust bits and all of the veins that are in its tail and throughout its body, and just kind of trying to like get all of those little details in, knowing that I'm going to go over and then tint them blue or tint them yellow. And that's kind of the plan here. And you want to make sure that it's dry fully before you go in and start tinting over the top, or else it will smudge. But once it's dry, you can go in and start tinting. And as you can see, this worked like exactly how I wanted it to. I was so happy. I was like, oh my gosh, it's starting to come together. And I am tinting certain areas a little bit more and other areas a little bit less, so you can get kind of a shading effect in there. And as you can see, it really brightened up that tail as well, and it really started bringing life to this sea creature. And I think it also really helped me organize where certain parts of the body were as well. So this was kind of the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, yay, a sea butterfly, versus what is this weird creature that I am drawing and I don't know what it's looking like. So I think it really started to kind of come together at this point with the glazing. Glazing is such a fun and useful technique. I really recommend playing with it if you never have before. Going in with some super dark blue to add in some tiny little like dark areas where necessary, and some dark red as well in the red areas, just kind of adding in a little bit more contrast. Same with the highlights, adding in a little bit more highlight in the kind of like sea butterfly wing area, and a little bit down in the tail. I'm just trying to give it some more contrast and make sure that it really looks glowy and beautiful, is kind of my goal at this point, just adding in all of those finishing details and blending things together. Once I was happy with it, it was time to make it feel as though it was part of the painting, and kind of finish everything up and pull everything together. So I started with this really, really bright yellow that I used to define the sea butterfly, because as you could tell before, it was really, really like fading into the background. The blue of the sea butterfly body was just the same blue as the background, and there wasn't any definition, so you couldn't really see at a glance where the butterfly's body ended and the background started. So I went in with the yellow, and then I also added in some green. I don't know why. I don't know. I still kind of regret it. And so I went back over with some dark blue, kind of toned down that green a little bit, and then started adding in some white Posca marker as well, adding in some splatters, and really not being afraid to paint over the sea butterfly as well, because I want it to feel incorporated in the background. I want it to feel like it's part of it. And you can always lift off parts. That's the beauty of acrylic. Because the sea butterfly is dry, I was able to kind of lift off the wet parts of the paint on top of the butterfly where I didn't want it. Spraying it with a little bit of that blue just to kind of really tie things together. And then I went in with the white marker and really added in some final highlights to the sea butterfly as well. Just some final white highlights that I'm not going to tint, that are just going to really like make it stand out. I do like to smudge the marker though with my finger. That is a really helpful little technique, is just like laying it down and smudging it. I'm using another texture sheet to add in some white dots. Just for some like bubbly kind of effects, because, you know, sea creature underwater, bubbles, and smearing a couple things around. But there's still something that feels missing to me. And then I realized that I wanted to imitate the veins on the butterfly's tail. So I drew in all these like long wavy lines in yellow, and then also in the blue with the blue marker. And then I was like, yes, that's it. Like, that's how I want it. Like, that's what I wanted to do. That was what tied it together. And I was really, really happy with it. So that was basically it. I varnished it because these are matte paints. I wanted it to have a glossy finish. I think it really brings out the colors. So I varnished it, and this is basically how it turned out. I might go back and add some metallic to it on my own. I don't know. I just love shiny things, but I hope that this video inspired you and gave you some ideas. I can't wait to see what you did this month, and thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to get your own box, click the link in the description box below. Bye, guys.